Hey everybody, welcome to another chess improvement video. This is Bao, and yeah, we're back at it with episode number 9? 8? I don't remember. But the last episode was really cool because we just kept on simplifying what we started with, the initial exercises that we were doing, the workout plan that we had come up with, and we have come to a good place where I really feel like at this point in the simplification, yeah, simplification process, we've really boiled down to the essence of what we wanted to improve, which was tactical motifs. There are so many things that I want to improve on. It's uh, definitely one of those systems where when you start there, you need a very broad base of knowledge. Some would say even shallow, but but yeah, if you want to improve, you gotta put your flag down in one place and kind of go at it. And so I've decided to focus on tactical motifs first, and I can't express how good it feels to finally have the exercises at a point where what would be the word? They feel I can actually feel improvement, or I can actually feel uh, the skills that I'm trying to improve on getting better. So yeah, we have slimmed down all the way to only focusing on one tactical motif and just doing one set problems or one move problems. So they're very, very simple. And at some point, we'll add in more tactical motifs, or maybe try a different set of problems with different tactical motifs, or even add in another move into the problem set. But for now, this is just one move, pins, and that's all we're doing. So yeah, let's get back to it. And I think it was kind of fun setting a goal last time, although the goal of doing 20 pins, 20 forks, and 20 mixed did not work out. That is like a lot. So I think since we now kind of have a better idea of how long it took me to do 20 pins, just even 20 pins, which was like 40 minutes or something like that. Let's just go for let's go for 15. We'll go to 15. Fuck it. Let's go to 20. We're going to do 20 again today. So, yeah, we're going to do 20 pin problems, one moves, and then, yeah, we'll see how I feel after this. So, instantly, this is a very obvious pin. My queen, his king, and the rook on f3. That means this rook isn't defended. Some things to consider. One would be, yeah, that's great, we can win a rook, but what happens when the queen takes the rook? Thankfully, we have our queen defending on f4, so let's say rook takes rook, queen takes rook, then we can just do queen takes queen on e8, and if the rook tries to capture back on f7, our queen is already there to defend f7. So that seems pretty dope. Another thing to consider would be the bishop coming in as well. Um, so yeah, if rook takes rook and maybe bishop comes in, that looks kind of dangerous, but that's a little slow because we can just move the rook back down, uh, which may be a problem. We could also just move the pawn to take the bishop. And since our knight wasn't really used in the defense in case our rook was taken on e8 anyway, or the rook on f7, I think that would be a fine trade. And also we have another little buddy, a bishop on c3 at the end there, so there could be alternative lines where that could be a useful defender, but seems pretty straightforward, so let's take it. Move on to the next one. Okay, so there is a pin by his pawn on e6, or his e6 pawn is pinned by my rook and his rook on the e files. But I wonder if that's the pin that we should be looking at, and I guess it is, because if that pawn wasn't there, we would just take his rook on e1, and that would be a back rank checkmate, which means this rook on d7 is not actually defended, and that queen can't actually help that rook because the pawn is blocking the way. So after we take the rook on d7 with our queen, that pawn's gonna become double pinned between the rook that's stopping a checkmate and the queen that's on g3. So neat, free rook. Okay. Let's see. Let's look for pins. Let's look for pins. Pins, pins, pins. Rook takes knight on c4 leads to rook takes rook, queen takes rook, and queen takes queen on c4. So that's no good. What is the specific pin that we're looking at here? I don't know. So an interesting potential that we have is that if we move our pawn up to a3 and the rook takes it, nah, the knight could take it as well. So yeah, I don't really see anything astounding about that actually. It wasn't interesting at all. Is there some kind of danger of mate? Yes, that is what the pin is. So his rook on c3 is pinned because if the rook were to move out of the way, queen to e1 would be a checkmate, a back rank checkmate, only possible by the queen because of her broad range of attack stops the king from being able to escape. Whereas if it was a rook, then the king could just dip down onto his second row and that'd be fine. So, if that's the case, if that rook cannot move due to a checkmate, that means this knight isn't defended and that we can take it with a rook. So, yeah, the original line of rook takes rook on c4 can't actually happen, and instead it just falters after rook takes knight. Oh, I said rook takes rook before. Anyway, you guys know what I'm saying. This sort of thing, I don't think it's like a incredible kind of checkmate that's a secret or anything, but like I feel like this sort of line and being able to see it actually requires a bit of like, or recognizing immediately, at least recognizes a bit of mating exercises as well, which like it's tricky for me because I've been thinking about this a lot, and my question is it, it's a chicken or the egg situation where the question is, do I focus on my mates as a beginner or do I focus on broadening my tactical motifs? And I'm starting to feel like, I guess every other day, it's like a leg day and upper body day, core day. I don't know. I'm not good at exercising. I'm a big fat chubby guy. I feel like, yeah, you have to train different muscles or you have to train different skills on different days so that you aren't necessarily just broadening your skill set, but also being able to utilize those skills synergistically. Um, so I guess a good idea maybe would be one day we do like pins, and the other day we do mating exercises, then we do forks, and then we do mating, and etc. etc. I don't really know. I don't have a plan yet that's very good, besides the fact that I'm very happy that I found the puzzle uh, set at a point where I'm very happy about how I'm training. But yeah, I guess as we continue on, we'll see. That's a lot of talk saying I don't have a fucking clue. So let's see what we have here. I wish this was a back rank situation, so then we could do something like queen takes bishop, and this pinned rook would have to take the queen, and then we could take the rook on b8 with the checkmate, but that's not the case. He has luft, So then the question becomes, what is going on? If our bishop was on d3 and this diagonal line from b1 to h7 was open, that'd be nice. That would make our life very nice and special, but it's not the case. Let's see what immediate threats there are. So the rook to rook thing, I think, is a big part of this. Let's take a look at rook to rook. Rook takes rook on b6. There are two potentials here. There's pawn takes, which leads to me just taking his bishop, so that's probably not it. Rook takes rook b6. Rook takes rook b6 seems like the better answer, but my question is, is there a weakness there? And I don't see one necessarily. I feel like this bishop could be a strong champion, our bishop on f1, but he's very closed off, and the only opening he has to get onto the board to be relevant is h3 via h3, and the queen is defending that, or has control of it already, so yeah, I don't know. It doesn't seem good. Queen takes bishop, rook takes queen, rook takes rook, king to h7. I'm sorry, rook takes rook b8 check, king to h7 over here. And then we take a rook. So we would be at 2 rooks and a bishop versus a queen. I mean, to be honest, that sounds pretty spiffy. That is not a bad trade. I would be willing to take a queen for 2 major pieces and a minor piece. Is it that simple? I don't know. I feel like that's the good trade. I can't imagine that's the right answer, though, because the game goes on for so long after that, but it is a decisive material advantage. I guess we could also consider what happens when queen takes bishop, rook takes rook. Well, then rook takes rook, and if rook takes rook again on b3, we just do pawn takes rook, and then the game continues on where he's down 2 major pieces and a minor piece, and I have a queen and a bishop. So either way, I feel like it's a staggering, well, one is much more of a staggering advantage than the other, but both feel good. Both feel pretty good. And late game, having 3 pieces compared to 1 piece, oof, that is a trade that I am willing to take. So, yeah, let's take it. Oh, it was right. I'm kind of curious to see what the suggested lines afterwards are. So, this is just terrible, right? Yeah, this goes like this, check to h7, and then I get a rook. Can the queen win another rook from me, however? Not necessarily. Okay. So, there is some shenags going on, but if it's just me losing 1 pawn... Ooh, nope, that would be a terrible move. It's a dangerous situation, no doubt about it, because anytime my rooks become uncoordinated, it's a issue. Ah, but my king is running away as well. Yeah, this doesn't seem that bad. Interesting. Okay, cool. So yeah, our trade calculation was successful, and we can move on to the next puzzle. We're at 4. We're going for 20. Queen's pinned by my queen king. We all know the story. Oh, also there's a skewer with the rook moving to a1 check, king forcing to move to d2, at which point we can do an in-between, take the queen, and then we can take the rook. That sounds pretty dope. I guess we do have to worry that he has a frickin' minor piece attacking me. So that's yeah, I should probably look at that first. Um, okay, I guess his attacker is in a dangerous situation as well. He only has one defender, and that's his queen. So, yeah, there are two different ways of thinking about this. We can do queen takes queen, king takes queen. Well, queen takes queen check, forcing the king to take the queen, and then we can take the knight. Or since our queen is defended at least once, we can do the knight attack first. Queen can't take anything because, defense. And so then queen would have to take queen, bishop would take, and our knight here is defended as well. That also seems pretty good. And seeing it how's excuse me, and seeing it as how these puzzle sets are about pins, I'm guessing they want us to do it with the pin, not necessarily just forcing them in a Zwischenzug. Zwischenzug? Zwischenzug. Oh, jeez. So yeah, I'll just do with a knight takes knight on e4, and then the queen can't take, and that looks pretty good. Oh, try again. What? Oh boy, did I make a flub here? Let's think about this. Try again, it says. Not even a nice job. I mean, there's a skewer over there at top. Oh my gosh. Is that just checkmate? Oh god, I'm so stupid. Last video, I swore that I would look for checkmates before anything else, and here I go again, just looking for frickin' minor pieces. I don't know why I'm stopping myself from swearing. Fucking minor pieces. Who the fuck is watching this anyway? Anyway, yeah, there's a fucking checkmate. I'm gonna stop saying fucking so much though. Um, yes, because of my bishop on b4, it has control of d2, and that rook to king move that we were talking about actually comes with benefit that the king has no place to go, has no flight squares, and that would be a checkmate. Oy vey. It's nice that it's nice that the computer or whoever set this whoever set this puzzle has set all of the alternatives to try against, but that's yeah, that's kind of insulting. Okay. Oh boy. How embarrassing. Look for mates first. Look for mates first. I'm still gonna forget. It's kind of one of those things that I don't know. One day, and maybe one day I'll get. But I guess that is another reason why we should be practicing mates. Looking at mates and practicing mates is a huge part of chess. If you don't know how to do a mate, or see an obvious mate as such as that one that I totally should have seen, or even know how to defend against them, chess life is going to be sad life. So yeah, rook, or let me take a step back. Pawn on d4, white's pawn, is pinned by my rook to his queen, is also defending the rook on c5. That is way too many things that it's trying to do. I can take rook. If pawn takes, I get queen, and pawn's kind of just stuck there. So yeah, if anything at all, I just win a rook outright, or I win a rook and we trade down, which is even better for me, really. So let's take that. Okay, simple. Alright, this looks checkmate-ish. Let's see what we have there. Yes, it is a checkmate. And also, I feel like we've done this puzzle before. We have, or something that's very similar to the point where it has the... Anyway. It has the exact same answer, which is... this has to be the same puzzle, because the first time we looked at this puzzle, I said I considered knight to e6 first for the checkmate, but then found out that the bishop could take the knight, so we had to flip over to the other side to knight to g6 with a checkmate. And this is a checkmate because the pawn cannot take the knight because it is pinned by this rook here, so it's a pin and a discovered attack, and it's a mate. It is like all the things we want to look for in a puzzle, and the knight has no flight squares because the queen is taking control of g8. So yeah, that's it. All right, 7 out of 7, which is really 7 out of 6. Let's be honest here. Does this mean they just castled, or does this mean they castled at all? What is this? What is all of this? I don't understand. This is for queenside castling. This is for kingside castling. Oh no, kingside and queenside, right? Our side hasn't castled though. What is this about? I'm so confused. What is this? I don't care. But anyway, what is the pin that we're looking for? Well, there is a pin on the opponent's pawn on f2, so that pawn can't move. It's also defending this bishop, and so we can take the bishop, and it's delicious. Where it leads from there, I do not know, but it's a one-move puzzle. That's the thing about one-move puzzles, it just brings out a little bit of laziness, knowing that you only have to find one good move, but for a beginner, I feel like that's okay. Practicing calculations can come over time as we add in more and more moves, which is also a delicious and wonderful thing. But yeah, for now, let's just take that bishop. But being good people, let's think about what would happen afterwards. Queen takes bishop, he can't do anything about it. His bishop doesn't have a lot of places it can move to, not relevant on the board. That knight is the thing that I'm most worried about, but moving to either h4 or g5 just comes with my queen taking it, so it can't really move anywhere. And since that pawn is pinned, we'll just try to move our pawn slowly forward, and that just looks pretty damaging. Queen's going to have to try to come out by moving to like d2, and then hopefully the knight can jump in here and try to cause some chaos potentially, but even after if he moves to g5, I don't know if it's something to worry about that much. I mean, his bishops are just kind of not in great places, and my bishop is astoundingly in a good place, so yeah. Positionally, I don't necessarily like white's place at all. 8 out of 8. Okay. So, if that rook wasn't there on d2, that would be checkmate. That's good. We looked at the checkmate. That being said, we're in check right now. Gut reaction would be bishop takes knight. Queen takes bishop, queen takes queen, rook takes queen. And then what? I don't know. So that would be gut reaction. Another idea would be queen takes queen. Oh, no, can't. I'm in checkmate. I'm dumb. So the other idea would be queen takes knight for a sack. What does that give us? I don't know. I honestly don't know what that would give us. I don't think that gives us anything good. Queen takes knight, and then queen can choose to move to like g2. Oh no. Queen has to take, right? So, queen takes knight, queen takes queen, bishop takes queen, rook takes bishop. It's almost the exact same combination that we've talked about. So I don't think that's it. The pin is on that. There is a pin on his pawn on c2. Did we already do this puzzle as well? I almost feel like we have, and I think we failed it last time. Interesting. So the knight has to be dealt with. Oh no, there was no. I'm thinking of a different puzzle where the knight was on f6 and their queen was on e5, and it was targeting our rook on h8. But that's neither here or there. I feel like we have had a puzzle like this one too, though. Interesting. Very interesting. We have to do something about the knight, or the king has to run away. But if that's the case, it's kind of a royal fork where the knight will get our rook And so then we'll have to take it with the queen, and we're down in exchange, basically. We're down material 3 points. 2 points? Some points. Not great. Minor for major. We can... I mean, yeah. We either run away or we take the rook. And so the question is... And running away isn't great because we just went over the knight taking the rook, and that doesn't sound good. So the question is, do we take it with the bishop or do we take it with the queen? Bishop takes. Queen takes. Queen takes. Rook takes. No back rank mate potentials that I see. Oh, I'm a dum-dum. There is back rank potential. Okay, so bishop takes queen takes can't happen. Because bishop takes queen takes is met with queen takes h1 check, where we take one of his rooks as well. That's terrible. So in that case, he would have to do, after my bishop takes knight on d6, he'd have to do queen takes queen on c6. Which seems fine. I don't know why he'd be worried about that. So yeah, it's... I guess in this case it's kind of a pin slash skewer. It's kind of a pin because they're evenly... point attributed material? Is that the correct term? Even valued material. Jesus Christ. So yeah, kind of works as a pin. So the question is, bishop takes d6, then queen takes c6. What a... I mean, that comes with rook takes c6. That's not great. So is there something better where we can force the queen to just stick there and not eat my queen? Because I would really, really like that. Because so far, it's still kind of an even, right? I mean, it's bishop takes knight, queen takes queen, rook takes queen. Oh, and then rook can't take bishop because my rook would be on c6. So in the end, actually, we do end up a little bit ahead. We end up a minor piece ahead. Whereas the other one would have ended with just an even trade, right? When we thought that the queen could move, it was bishop takes knight, queen takes bishop, queen takes queen, and rook takes queen. All on d6. But now... we know that the queen can't go there. So, yeah, we end up one minor piece ahead. Neat! And then, yeah, I would imagine it would go that way afterwards because she doesn't want to keep staying there doing that. Especially with something like bishop b4 in the moves. Anyway, cool. 9 out of 9. Wow, 20 is a lot, but I feel like that's a good amount to do. Cool. Okay. So, there's a pin. If that rook wasn't there, then there would be a pin. And if... there's a lot of things going on. This is a dangerous board. Holy cow. Okay, there is just so much going on. Let's see here. Baba boo boo baba. Mate threat-wise, the one I see is thanks to the pin on g7. Well, the pin that can happen with my bishop. His pawn on g7 and his king on h7, h8, is that the rook can take that pawn currently, and there aren't any defenders or controllers for that space. And that looks very much like a check. And he has no places to run away to, and so that would be checkmate. Is this true? Yes. Yes, it is true. So we'll do it. Cool. 10 out of 10. I like the simple ones sometimes, too. Nyuk, 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 nyuk. I mean, we could take the queen with the rook. But then he takes our rook with a check, and then we have to move our king, and then he would take our other rook. So that's not great. Another idea would be rook. Oh, actually that is great, because he can't actually take our rook on e8 with his rook, because our rook would be on c2. And so he can't just move his rook because it's pinned. Because these puzzles are about pinning. Cool. Alright. So we can take the queen without worry. The rook can't take our rook. He'll have to take with a d1 rook, at which point we'll just trade down as much as possible. We have the queen. We're in a winning position. Let's do it. Oh, yeah. I guess he could have taken with the other rook, yeah. Okay. Knight's under attack there. That's cool. That's cool, but he has 2 defenders there. That's not too much to worry about. How did we get our H pawn all the way to G2? That's insane. I guess it could be the F pawn as well. That's hilarious. Okay, well, I mean, that pawn is defended. If that knight wasn't there, there are no defenders for f1. If rook moves to f1, that's checkmate. The only defender is this knight. So we can just take that knight, and he has to waste a tempo defending f1 somehow. Cool. The question is, how is he going to defend, and should I be taking with my queen or the bishop? I mean, I'm not the kind of guy who just readily sacks a queen without a very, very certain amount of certainty. Oh God, that sounds awful. Without total certainty, or close to total certainty, that I'm going to get a huge material bonus, or that I'm going for a mate. Oh my gosh. This is like a mate in 3, and it's forced too. Oh my gosh, because that king can't run away. So if bishop takes knight on e3, that's check, and it has to be defended by taking that piece. Let's say with the rook, for example. At that point, I can force again with the queen takes, and the queen would have to be forced to take, at which point I would just checkmate. I mean, either way, actually, like, there are not a lot of ways this is going to go well. So why is one taking it more important than the other? We definitely have to leave the rook, or it wouldn't be a checkmate scenario. It's keeping that f2 square from being liftable for the king. I mean, I definitely would just go with the bishop. You don't need to bring in the big guns right now. This bishop is very incisive scalpel, and it would do the job perfectly, so I think it'd be fine. This looks like a forced mate. I don't understand. Should I move with a queen? That doesn't seem right. Ugh. Am I missing something? Let's think about this. Let's calculate it instead of just panicking from winning too hard. Bishop on g5 takes knight on e3. Check. King cannot move. Rook takes. Queen takes. Check again. King cannot move. Queen can block, but then queen would take, and that's also a checkmate. So that's no good. Oh, that's also interesting, though. The checkmate that we have on f1, if the rook moves, is gone. Oh, gosh. Yeah. The f1 square would then be defended by the bishop on d3. Oh, boy. Okay, let's go back to what we were saying then. So bishop takes knight e3, rook takes bishop e3, queen takes rook e3, and queen takes queen e3, and at that point I can't do rook f1 checkmate because there would be bishop f1 and take my rookie rook. So that is not the right answer in this situation. Excellent. We've figured something out. We have figured one thing out. So he is actually not that bad of a position, except for the darn fact that yeah, it's that knight is definitely pinned. But yeah, the pin can be reduced by the fact that when the rook moves to defend that knight, it actually opens up another defender for f1. So bon savant. I don't know what that means. Bon means good. I think I just made up the second word. Good. Okay, so the bishop takes knight. Not as good as we originally thought. Excellent. That cancels one thing off the checklist. However, that also means that the queen takes knight sack isn't that good either. Queen takes knight, rook takes knight, or queen takes knight e3, rook takes queen e3, bishop takes rook e3 is again followed by queen takes on e3 at the end, and that ain't that scary. So, although that knight on e3 is pinned and delicious, it actually is fairly safe from being taken. Is that the only pin we are worrying about for this mating net? If somehow we were able to disable the queen, or I'm sorry, disable the knight on e3, while also... there's no also about that. If there was a way to disable the knight on e3, oh yeah, while also keeping the rook on e2, blocking that bishop from defending f1, that would be the ideal scenario. That would be the ideal scenario. And I'm trying to think of what other combinations that require or could potentially distract the bishop as well in this situation. I mean, like, if queen could sack to take bishop on d3, and then we could sack next turn for that knight on e3, that'd be great. And we don't want to sack while taking the bishop on d3 while having the queen take d3, because then it as well would defend on f1. There's a tricky bit of crap going on. I don't know why I want to swear so bad today. Shit. Crap. Cack. Yeah, I don't know. I really don't know. That being said, queen moving to d4 looks pretty awesome, because that's on the back rank, and yeah, the king has not a lot of places to go. I think queen going to a1 with a check would probably be met by, oh boy, I guess rook to e1 would be the only viable option, because knight to f1 would just be met with the queen taking it with our rook being in coordination on f6. So that sounds sweet, but queen d4, a very quiet move, I don't think is exactly what this puzzle is looking for. There's the pin. Oh my fuck. I'm so dumb. So we were worried about rook f1 because the knight can take on f1. However, we forgot a very simple thing, which is that the knight is already pinned by the queen on e3. The knight is pinned. We've been saying that over and over again, and then we're like, oh yeah, the knight's pinned, but the knight then can defend f1. No, it can't defend shit. So I can actually safely do the original mating pattern that we saw just like 5 minutes ago. Oh boy, I'm a idiot. So yeah, rook f1 is checkmate because there's nothing that can take that piece because the knight is pinned by the queen, and there is no flight square for the king. Oh my gosh, that's so embarrassing. I can't believe I just. It's a disconnection of information. It's when you have both pieces of information, A and B. It's like somebody telling you how to get from your house to Disneyland. Like, you're like, how do I get to Disneyland, John? And John's like, well, you have a car. And you're like, that doesn't, what? I can't, what? That's basically what happened there. Oof, that's heavy, man. It's dementia. That's what that is. Early onset of dementia. No, I shouldn't joke about that. I don't really care enough to not joke about that. Okay. So yeah, next puzzle. We're 12 out of 12 at this point. That's pretty neat. But where's the pin, boys? Where is the pin in this situation? Maybe we're making a pin. I don't see any obvious pins. It seems like all of our pieces are trying to stay away from pins, which is pretty sweet. Are there any potential mating situations here? And I would say, not really. The king over there has a lot of flight squares. For instance, if we do rook on b1 to b7 check, king can go first row or he can go second row. Not necessarily a lot of ways to continue the checks either. Queen d4 is, that's just a trade of queens, and then we get maybe a pawn at the end of that, so that's not great. And of course, queen h6 is defended by his pawn, so that's no good. No pins. A lot of flight squares. I guess there would be queen c3 if he moved his king to f6. But there's pawn to e5, so doesn't look that interesting to me yet. Doesn't really stand out. The queen moved from b4 to a4 because of my rook on b1. Fair enough. That opened the file. And so b7 does seem like, oh, b7 would be a terrible move because of the bishop on d5. Let's look at the diagonals. But yeah, king had a bunch of flight squares anyway. b7, rook b7 wouldn't have been very important. Yeah. And, I mean, he doesn't have to the king, if the bishop was not defending b7, the king would not have to run away to f6 anyway. He has a first row that has a defending rook on it already, which is fairly strong. There would have to be some reshuffling for some coordination, but I don't think it would be that bad. And this is supposed to be a pin. So I think I'm going to safely say, currently from the situation, this position that we're at, I don't see a potential mating net. Potential ways of making this a mating pattern of some sort would be queen to g5, which is a very slow and quiet move. I don't know if it's that slow, but it's fairly quiet. And there's potentials for aggression from the queen right after that, so yeah, not that great. Rook trading with the bishop on d5, I don't think is the answer either. Rook takes bishop, pawn takes rook. Queen question mark. Yeah, that's I mean, that being said, rook takes bishop, pawn takes rook, rook b7, king to, let's say, either, let's start with f8, at which point we would have queen e7. Queen could get in our way by first doing queen d4, check, king h1. That way there aren't any more, there would only be one more check after that that she could do, and then she wouldn't be on a dark square for any more checks after we run to h2. Oh, would she have d6? No, she wouldn't have d6. So yeah, she couldn't do another check. So from, yeah, queen d4 check, king to h1. She could defend the g7 pawn, which would be the pawn that would be in danger. And then maybe we'd do like queen d7, at which point he would probably run his rook all the way back to f8. And that should be fairly safe for them, but I don't know. That's a fairly long calculation, and I might have misplaced the king, his king, at some point in that. Like f8. Oh, if he does f8 and I go queen e7, f8's terrible, actually, because, yeah, so if we start from the beginning, rook takes bishop, pawn takes rook, d5, rook to b7 check, and if he does king to f8, that is straight up queen to e7 check, move the king to g8, and then queen to g7, and that'd be checkmate. So f7 bad. So after rook to b7, king, if he's going anywhere on the first row, it would be g8. Queen would still have to come up to, oh, no, interesting. Don't have to go to e7 first. We can stop at e6, check, and if he goes to f7, of course that leads to the same thing, so that's terrible. So he has to go to f8, at which point that would still be checkmate. Oof. Okay, so like first row, just terrible. Rook takes bishop, pawn takes rook, d5, rook to b7. We figured out that like all of the king going to any of these top row, bad. So, alright, he moves to g6 at this point. We have queen to e7 check. Takes away this diagonal, so the only place he can go to would be g6. We can move queen down, which would push him down either queen to e6 check, and he's on g6, so he can go g5 or h5. That seems to be getting weaker by the second. So instead of moving the queen on e7, let's move the bishop down one. So this diagonal still closed. King is on g6, and so he has to go to h5 or h6. Oh, he can't go to h6. I'm a dum-dum. He only has h5 at that point. Do we have something with the queen? Oof, that is really close to another mate. I feel like with 3 pawns, a rook, and a queen, and his queen and rook not being able to do any shenags over here, that is also a potential check, a mating pattern, Most deaths. Most deaths. So rook takes bishop, pawn takes rook d5, rook b7 check. King goes to f6, queen to e7 check. King goes to g6, rook to b6 check. Forced move to h5, king does. Queens on e7. How crazy would it be if it's g4? Pawn to g4 check, pawn takes pawn, pawn takes pawn, check, queen takes pawn, pawn takes pawn. Okay, so it can't be that. I mean, yeah, in the end, if that's the case, then the queen would, we would win a queen for a pawn, so that'd be awesome. But let's not think that way. Kings on h5, queens on e7, rooks on b6. Well, I'm dumb. Queen to f7 looks pretty good. He still can't go to the 6th line. He can go to g5 now, or to h4. So let's say he goes to g5. And that would be terrible, because then queen to f6, defended by the rook. And, so yeah, back here maybe? But then now I can take the pawn. He's losing squares fast. Only square he can go to here is here. Yeah, there must be some kind of play from there that's extremely good. All of that looks really good, though. So I think the conclusion I'm coming to is, after we take that bishop, the king doesn't have a first row to fly to, and moving closer to us against a queen and a rook just seems like a dangerous, perilous kind of thing to do. So I think maybe I'm completely wrong, but I'm just going to do the rook takes bishop, because if he tries to defend that, or if he tries to take that rook and be greedy, that just looks terrible for him. That being, I say this phrase way too often, but that being said, rook takes bishop could potentially be met with, oh, there's no in-between move. I was worried about the queen to d4, but my rook's still alive, so I'd take the queen with my rook happily. Ha ha ha. So that's great. Yeah, I'm taking that bishop. I'm probably very wrong. Ooh, nice. I am so curious about that other, whatchamacallit? Oh, I didn't even calculate the g6 flight either. But yeah, if it was this flight, where does this lead? So it goes there. Oh, wait. What am I doing? Oh, okay. Yes. Oh my god. For some reason I was thinking the bishop was on. Oh, I remember why I thought the bishop was there. But I should have just kept in mind that the bishop's right there on b7 at this point, and I can take all these pawns. All these pawns. I love these pawns, and oh my god, this looks so dangerous. And now there's another pin, and oh my god, that would be terrible. Oh, yeah, I calculated wrong. I was right enough to the point where I knew this was going to be a bad move for him, but oh my gosh. Okay, so if I had been dumb and, oops, let's say he had done this and I had done that, is this still pretty good for white? How much is white up by? I don't know where the percentages are on Komodo or on Chess Tempo's Komodo. Does anybody know? There are no numbers anywhere. I mean, there are numbers everywhere. Is this it? 945? That seems too good. This looks like kilobytes or something. I don't know what that means. Yeah, I don't know. And so what if I had been dumb and tried to do something like this? Is this bad? Oh, this is bad. Oh my gosh, this was terrible. Well, thank God I just kind of sucked at calculating that. Wow, I totally forgot that the rook and the queen were on the same. Whew, boy. Yeah, that would have been an interesting way to win a queen at the end. Well, I was right in the wrong way, which is not very right at all. That's a shame. Calculated far enough to know that he was in a dangerous position, and I'm really proud of my calculations for the first row, but the calculations for that third row flight with the king were not good. Not good. Okay. So I can take that bishop because the pawn is the only defender, but it's pinned by my rook. Delicious. And then I have enough time to fly away and also probably defend against the d pawn. Cool. 14, 14. That's like, I would honestly say I'm at like 12 and 14 at this point for that one puzzle where I was completely wrong. This one's a checkmate. We've seen I think we're getting very used to this pawn being pinned by the diagonal bishop to the king, and I really want to utilize this in my future games. Getting the bishops, not just trying to control long diagonals, but getting them looking at important pieces for pins. I think that's what the rooks and the bishops are great at, and I haven't been utilizing the bishop pin as much as I should. Really, really important. Very important. Cool. What am I? I'm white. Okay. So, bishop pinned. If my pawn could come up, that'd be a delicious trade. Huh. Oh boy. That king looks like he's gonna get checkmated. Queen to b5. What is there to stop queen to b5 check? Not the bishop, because of my rook. Not his rook, not the queen. Let's just check him. Neat! Alright, 16-16 or 14-16, if anybody's counting for realsies. Yes, I will take that rook, thank you. Yes, it is pinned, not the rook, but the pawn. I mean, worst case scenario, I end up with a rook or I end up traded down with a rook. Wait, we've done this puzzle. Or something very similar. Well, I think there are ways that you can set up these sets so that after you get a puzzle right, you don't keep getting the same puzzles. So that might be something we may have to refine further. But that being, oh god, I'm gonna stop saying that. I swear to God. But yeah, even if that is the case, or I'm very happy to refine it later. I'm actually very happy about that. And furthermore, lost my train of thought. Something about, oh yeah. But all the while, I mean, man, I gotta learn some synonyms for the phrase that being said. Because I'm just wanted to reiterate how happy I am about just doing pins today, the one move pins. I really feel like I'm getting a much better idea and clearer understanding of what's going on. So to continue, I think we've gone this puzzle before as well, because there was this thought of the pin between my queen and his queen, and how I really wanted to take that knight because that would be sweet and juicy. And then we started calculating, well, what if he takes with the pawn on d5 to my knight? And then we had not figured out the puzzle. That's what had happened. Good, Yogi. And then we had looked at knight to b5 to put pressure on the queen while still knowing that the pawn was unable to move. However, 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 not sure. However, what? Why is that a bad move? I thought for a second I knew exactly why that was a bad move. Oh, however, that pin isn't that great once it's removed when queen takes, and then queen takes queen on c7, and then his knight would be the defender for c7, and then rook would take. So yeah, we would come out fairly even, so that's not great. I think the key was that there was another pin in here somewhere, but I don't remember. Instead of trying to remember, I guess I should try to figure out the puzzle, but yeah, I mean, we thought about things like knight takes knight, pawn takes knight, bishop takes pawn, pawn takes pawn. I mean, but that wouldn't happen. That's not exciting. We were also thinking about like knight takes h6 and then pawn takes h6 or g takes h6, I'm sorry, to be clear. To be using the annotation clearly. So that's that. Maybe nope. No, I don't see it. This one's tricky. I don't like challenges. Man, I really feel like the knight sacrifice on h6 would be pretty sweet. But with my rooks on c and d file and my queen kind of blocked over there on the c file as well, that doesn't look like the promising move at all. Is it queen takes knight? Ah, no, I don't think that's it. Queen takes knight, pawn takes queen. Oh god, knight takes pawn takes knight, bishop takes pawn. Oh jeez, none of this looks good. None of that looks good. And why would bishop take pawn instead of rook not taking queen? What the hell? Oh, that's awful. That's not good at all. Oh man. Really wish I could remember what the idea was here. I think there was some kind of calculation error I made about who takes what and why they can't take. I was very focused too much on the pin between the pawn on c6 and the queens that I didn't even realize that there was some kind of issue with the pawn on e6. But I don't know if that's true. So knight takes knight, pawn takes knight, and then we win a pawn. But that also opens up his rook, or I mean his bishop on d7 to take my knight, which doesn't look great. There's no reason why our knight could go to f6 for a check. That pawn is not pinned, and also, his bishop on e7 could easily take. So that doesn't look like it. There are no pawns to remove the pinner currently on c6, nor would we want that to happen until that knight was taken care of. For people who are watching, like binge watching this, God knows why they would be, but if they are, and they've already seen this puzzle, they must be fucking banging their head against the keyboard, shouting at me. What is the deal with airplane food? Potentially we could do knight takes knight, pawn takes knight on d5, like e takes knight on d5. We can just quickly move our queen away at that point for something as well, leaving the pin on c6, but with the rook attacking the queen, which is pretty awesome. But I don't know what we would be looking for at that point. And I don't think that's the answer, especially when this is a one-move puzzle. I wonder if we've seen this puzzle in like a multi-move puzzle, and this is just, you know, a one-move version of it. I don't know. Frustrating. I would really like to kind of see the eureka moment for this one. Potentially, this might have been the puzzle where at the end we were unsure of how equal it was because they made a certain move and we were confused about it. Like immediately after knight takes knight and e takes knight on d5, our knight on on g4 is under attack, and while our queen is also under attack. So the knight takes knight comes with a heavy price there. Mwah. 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 Ugh. So, like, I'm kind of happy that the knight's there and that the pawns aren't opened up for that white squared bishop on d7. But what am I supposed to do? G knight to h6 check, pawn takes knight. Queen to d3. Ugh, that's weak and slow and not very good. Boo. 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 You smell like candy. Bishop takes d5. Bishop takes d5. Pawn. E takes bishop. Knight takes. Queen's in trouble. Queen moves to d8. Knight takes bishop e7 check. King moves. Queen to d3 check. King moves again if necessary. Or if king goes to h8, then we can move our knight away. So did we win anything in this whole thing? I guess we won another bishop. Well, that's not bad. That might be the answer. Bishop takes knight. Whew. Bishop takes knight. E takes bishop. Knight takes pawn d5. Queen moves away. Bishop takes... Yeah, bishop takes... Or knight takes bishop, check. King has to move. We get enough time to run our bishop away. That seems pretty good. that seems like the puzzle right there. I'm gonna go with that. So knight takes knight was leading to problems where we didn't have tempo after the knight disappeared, but by trading our bishop, it looks like, yeah, that's the right thing. Well, I'm glad I was able to kind of calculate that out. I am wondering now how much that was me remembering what the correct thing was, or actually me calculating that out. Either way, things worked out, and I mean, part of this training is to rote memorize these patterns until they just kind of come naturally. But I guess that's more of a calculation thing. So that's not even like the pin pattern that we were looking for, the tactical motif. Anyway, in this situation, the knight on f6 is pinned because this square g7 is very valuable, because if that knight ain't there and they don't have any defenders, the queen on c3 is going to take that pawn, and that's going to be a checkmate. So that means this knight right now not actually defended. So I'm going to take that knight. And we're at 19 at 19, and that means we're on our last puzzle, and that's good, because I've started making weird voices, and that's bad. I think we've seen this before, but yeah, it's a sweet royal bishop pin, and that means this pawn on g2 isn't defended by anything except for the king, and he can't do anything about this checkmate. So yeah, the pin practice seems to be going pretty well. I mean, some of these were very, very easy, but I'm very happy about it. 20 out of 20 looks good, but let's be honest here, kind of actually 18 out of 20. And that last one I had to calculate on 3 problems ago. Don't really know if that was just because of my memory or whatnot. The brain is a strange thing. But yeah, I'm just to say it again, I'm really happy about doing these one move pin puzzles. And if you're a beginner like me, or intermediate, I would suggest you go back to the basics and start with tactical motifs. I think you know, the tactical motifs are good as well, and I think we definitely want to keep on expanding our lexicon, our tool set. However, the mating patterns are also just as important. So yeah, come back next time. Yeah, maybe we'll do some mating. Maybe we'll do some more pins. I think the goal with the pins, I guess the question is, when am I going to move on to the next tactical motif? At least that's a question I have in my head. The answer is, I have no fucking idea. I think, at some point the pins, the one move pins are going to become very, very intuitive for me. I think this training session, definitely I felt like I was a little speedier on seeing some of them. The more difficult puzzles, maybe not, were the ones where there was a bit of calculation, like that king mate potential one. That was insanely long, but very fun to calculate, very rewarding. But yeah, when it comes to the simple puzzles, I'm getting a little bit quicker at seeing exactly where the mate is and how things are doing overloaded on tasks and whatnot. So that's cool. I'm going to say I'll probably do a couple more of these pin sessions, and then maybe we'll move on to forks, and somewhere in between there we'll do some mate puzzles as well. But yeah, I don't know. Yeah, this is less this is less about promising anything to you guys, which of there's not many viewers at all, 0 viewers, and then like 2 friends that have watched this. But this is more for me to figure out how far this training, or how exactly this training is gonna go. And I think I'm still happy about, yeah, just working on the pins, because I feel like there's still a lot to develop mechanically and kind of memorizationally within the pins. I'm still not seeing them as quick as I should. So, I don't know. No set number, but I think let's just keep on doing pins until one, we run out of puzzles, and then the whole episode is me just saying, haven't we done this one before? Haven't we done this one before? Or two, I get quick enough and bored enough where I feel like moving on to the next one. So, yeah, thanks for watching, guys, and smash that like button and all of that stupid shit. Whatever. I don't give a fuck. I'll see you guys later.